For a lot of people that get onto Big Brother, their goal is to make it to at least the jury phase of the game. But unfortunately, not everyone can make it there. Each season, we see 5 to 7 players get the boot pretty early on, and they're forced to go back home and watch the season from the comfort of their own home. However, just because they left early doesn't mean that they weren't a good player. For the most part, they're usually not that good of players, but there have been some standouts that were sniped out way earlier than anticipated for one reason or another. And today, we're gonna talk about the best. There have been about 100 pre-jury players throughout Big Brother, but only 5 of them get to make this list. Consider subscribing or leaving a like to help out the algorithm. And without further ado, here are the 5 best pre-jury players in Big Brother history.
I just want to kind of be off the radar until I have to be, and then I'm going to go strong.
Hey, little self-promo here that's at least tied to the subject. Here on YouTube for my YouTube members, as well as over on Patreon, I have been ranking and tier listing every player in Big Brother history based on their placements across the past couple of months, starting with the 17th placers and working my way up every couple of weeks, which is all leading up to one gigantic player ranking that I'll do once the journey is complete. We're just about finished with all the pre-jury placements, so if you're looking for a more detailed explanation and my feelings on literally every player, go check that out by joining on Patreon or by joining here as a YouTube member today. God, he's such a weird player to rank. He just wanted to go home the whole time. How am I going to reward that? I can't reward it.
I don't freaking know what to do with Kenny, man.
Starting off this list, at the number 5 spot, I actually have one of the most recent pre-jurors, and that's Brooklyn from Big Brother 26. Brooklyn must have had some killer aura emanating off of her at the start of the season, because this woman was included in damn near everything. She was brought into the Adjusted Collective Alliance. She was included in the not really that real but still good to be included in Barbershop Alliance. She was in the 5 Points Alliance. She was in the powerful Pentagon Alliance, who were really the ones calling the shots in the early game, and she had a Final 2 deal with both Chelsea and Quinn. Brooklyn was never the one actively forming these alliances, so the fact that she was brought in and included in so many of them is a testament to her early season social game. And this put her in one of, if not the best spot in the house across the first 3 weeks. Like, in that chaotic third week, it felt like the crosshairs were lined up on nearly every single person at one point or another. But because Brooklyn was positionally protected on all sides, and she was playing a calmer and quieter game than most, she was one of just a couple people to avoid all the danger that week. Brooklyn had showcased that she was a very capable player, both strategically and socially. However, she did have some flaws. She didn't have a great relationship with Angela or Tucker, and they were actively wanting to target her. And Brooklyn didn't really do the greatest job handling this, as she sorta instead added fuel to the fire by either confronting them or wrecking their clothes in a veto competition. But it made for great entertainment. Brooklyn got pretty unlucky once Tucker won the HOH in week 5 and secretly wanted to target her, as he saw her as the head of the snake running the game from behind the scenes. But even so, she still had life in the game. Tikor, Chemo, and Rubina were all actively trying to protect her from Tucker, and the numbers were nearly there to save her against Cam, with Brooklyn herself doing a good job campaigning and almost pulling it off. And I think if Tucker wasn't so determined to get her out, Brooklyn might have survived here, which would have been super impressive. So overall, even though Brooklyn didn't act the most ideal when her back was against the wall, I do think the overall chaoticness of the season played a large factor in her eventual downfall. And due to the fact that she displayed an elite ability to form relationships, and the fact that she was positioned to make a very deep run after the first few weeks, as well as showing to have a very solid strategic hat on her shoulders, it was enough to give Brooklyn a spot in the top 5.
I came into the Big Brother house knowing that I would never turn down an alliance. Being a part of the 5-Point Alliance feels pretty good right now, but all of my loyalty is still to the Pentagon. Tucker. Oh, Tucker, you like your clothes all nice and neat? Too bad. Sorry, not sorry.
Coming in at the number 4 spot, we have Ameerah from Big Brother 24. Ameerah is the earliest boot to make this list, being evicted in just week 3, in 14th place. However, in those 3 weeks, Ameerah showcased a really strong ability to play the game. Right from the get-go, she helped form the Girls Alliance that really took charge of the dynamics in the first week, and then she was soon pulled into an additional alliance by Paloma shortly afterwards. But Ameerah really began showing off her Big Brother skills once Paloma shockingly left the house in week 1. After this shockwave hit, Ameerah quickly took hold of the reins and started reshaping the house to her benefit. She took the members of that side alliance Paloma pulled her into and made it into a new alliance called the Pose Pack. Then, just because she wanted additional protection in the game, she went and created another 6-person alliance called Old School, just to make sure that she was covered on pretty much every side. She used her alliances to give her power and control, and she was one of the main driving forces involved in getting the house to evict Pooch over Taylor in week 2. At this point, Ameerah was pretty much queen of the castle, being involved in an alliance with damn near everyone in the house, and if you had me placing bets at this point, Ameerah would have been one of my top 2 picks to win it all going into week 3. Unfortunately for her, that's where everything began to fall apart. Although Ameerah had been successful in her endeavors thus far, she wasn't always the most clean with it. She would often flip-flop on who she wanted to target, throwing out Brittany, Taylor, Pooch, and Joseph as names she wanted gone in the first 2 weeks, which isn't really good to air out, as that can easily come back to bite you if you're not careful. She also had this moment with Monty, where she told him that Taylor wanted him gone before jury, but then immediately shut him down when he brought up voting out Taylor, because she wanted Pooch gone. And this showed Monty that his voice wasn't valued as much as hers in the alliance. So when one of the few people Ameerah wasn't working with, Turner, won the third HOH, things just started to snowball. Some of the guys started talking and realized just how not in control of the game they were, and they wanted to make a big move. So the famous Leftovers Alliance was formed, and they decided that they wanted to target who they thought was the current queen of the castle, Ameerah, thus showing that Ameerah's threat management wasn't very good either. So Ameerah was blindsided at the veto meeting once her and Terrence were nominated, but even at this point, Ameerah had a ton of support from her allies. Like, half the players were crying at her nomination and vowing to not vote her out, and she even had Terrence practically volunteering himself to go home so that she could stay in the game once they hit the block. Ultimately, the Leftovers did have the votes to send her home regardless, but the fact of the matter is that for the first 2 weeks of the game, Ameerah was in control. She was basically the leader of 2 or maybe even 3 different alliances. She had arm's length connections with practically everyone that wasn't named Turner or Joseph. She had shown to be very competent at competitions, and had 1 or 2 comps gone a different way, I think Ameerah could have potentially steamrolled for many more weeks. So even though she lasted only 3 weeks, she did enough to land at the number 4 spot.
So I really want to make sure the girls are banding together so we can get the numbers to get these really strong male figures in the house out of the house.
Pooch thinks he's just a pawn, but he's a bigger threat to my game than Taylor. So sending him home is just too good of an opportunity to pass up on. Big Brother isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. This is going really well, and it's actually really fun to take people out.
Coming in next at number 3, we have a player who is most well known for her exit, but someone who many forget was in a really excellent position just before her eviction, and that's Rachel from Big Brother 20. Right off the bat, Rachel formed a very strong early game connection with both Angela and Casey, as well as good bonds with Brett and Winston, which contributed to the formation of the Level 6 Alliance in Week 1. In this alliance, Rachel was in one of the best and safest spots because, unlike Angela, Winston, and Brett, the Faute side of the house was never targeting Rachel. In fact, Rachel was probably the most successful person from Level 6 outside of Tyler in terms of mingling with Faute and developing her own personal relationships with them. So, Rachel was laying low, she had great connections and shields in front of her, she wasn't being targeted, and she was in the dominant alliance that was dictating the action in the house. While she was by no means the star of the show, she was playing quite well. And after 4 weeks, Rachel was genuinely looking like a top 3 contender to win the crown. Unfortunately, things took a turn for her in that final pre-jury week. But even then, things weren't even looking that bad. Bailey was looking for a pawn to put on the block next to her target Brett, and Rachel looked to be the safest option simply because Bailey felt confident that nobody would vote her out. And then, as a sign of good faith, Bailey let Rachel in on the fact that she had a power, which was something that she had told 0 other people. Like, Bailey didn't tell anyone in her alliance, but she told Rachel. So, clearly, Rachel had done fairly well socially with Bailey in order to get her to trust her with that information. Even the way that Rachel became the target this week was a bit wonky, because at the start of the week, Rachel was not the target for either side of the house. It was only once Bailey told Rachel some incorrect, damning evidence about Tyler turning on Angela that the tides began to turn. Rachel told Angela that Tyler was turning on her, but Angela and the rest of Level 6 just didn't believe Rachel, in that she was twisting words around and just freaking out. Rachel was already not doing great while on the block, being a little too paranoid and having an intensity to her while nominated that made her seem like a liability to her allies. So they decided to flip the votes to get her out. However, she did still have the other side of the house voting to keep her, and she came just 1 vote away from making it to the jury. Overall, I think Rachel was a very solid player who just had a hard time handling the heat when she was in the hot seat. But if she was simply a little bit cooler under pressure, then she would have been a real deadly Big Brother player. Even so, she still played well enough for me to pick her as the 3rd best pre-juror.
We can have the numbers. It was Winston, and Brett, and me, and you. I'm in. I'm just gonna try and get him out. I'm gonna try my damnedest.
I'm sad I'm on the block with an Alliance member, but I want everyone to know that I came here to compete. I'm not going home.
I really don't want to see Brett go home. I was crying in the diary rooms over Brett this whole freaking week.
I know!
What the frick? What?
Please don't curse.
Okay, up next, we have probably my most difficult choice in the sense that I actually had this player at the number 1 spot for pretty much the entire time I was writing this, only to change my mind at like the very last second. So, the player that I have chosen as the 2nd best pre-juror in all of Big Brother history is Clay Honeycutt from Big Brother 17. For a long time, Clay was the pre-juror to have survived the longest in the house, making it all the way to week 6 before his eviction. And during his stay, Clay was one of the players driving the action. He was quickly incorporated into the dominant alliance of the early season, the Sixth Sense, and from there, his reach only expanded. He was a part of the Sleeper Cell Side Alliance. He was included in the very short-lived 8-person Dark Moon Alliance. He was in this 3-person grouping with Vanessa and Shelly, and obviously, he was in a showmance with Shelly. Due to the fact that Shelly and Vanessa won HOH like 4 weeks in a row in the beginning, Clay was a key figure in terms of the decision decision making and action of the early game, and he showed to have a competent strategic head on his shoulders, albeit sometimes he was a little naive. Regardless, we can see that Clay was absolutely covered head to toe in alliances, he was a power figure, and he showed to be at least decent in competitions. But even past those main points, he had additional loyalties and bonds. He had a close bond with Johnny Mac, he had a working relationship with Steve, and he even had people on the other side of the house, like Jeff and Meg, wanting to pull him in and work with him. Socially, Clay was very, very strong, and even though he did get into a couple of fights, he maintained his excellent position throughout the first month and a half of the game. Things obviously came tumbling down in week 6, once he and Shelley were blamed for Jason's eviction in week 5, which caused James to nominate the two of them. But even so, Clay was not the target. Shelley was. But Clay chose to be the knight in shining armor and practically asked the rest of the house to vote him out so that Shelley could stay. So, because of the fact that Clay was one of the most social and integral players in terms of the house dynamics, and he wasn't even supposed to be a pre-jury boot, he has a very strong argument for being at the number 1 spot. However, because of the fact that a lot of his success came from Shelley and Vanessa winning HOHs, as well as his tendencies to get into heated arguments, I ultimately landed him here at number 2.
Right now, the plan to get out Davon is in full effect. I'm really happy that Shelley trusts me enough to actually consider my opinion and put up Davon on the block. Austin just took out James, and as of now, it looks like my alliance is sitting pretty with getting James out of the house.
It's like she is brainwashed. She wants James gone.
Jeff and Jason start realizing that Audrey isn't going to be backdoored this week. Of course, I already knew that. I really have to just play dumb so I can protect myself.
You tell me you knew, right?
No.
I'm dead serious. Both of you seriously did not know?
Of course I knew about the plan. However, I don't know what to say without exposing everything that's going on.
If you're still here, you got people. No. I can't wait to get you drunk in New York City.
Don't tell anybody.
And now, at the number 1 spot, I have a player that I feel a lot of people will disagree with me on. But I disagree with that disagreement. So, at the number 1 spot, I have Joseph from Big Brother 26. For starters, Joseph finished in 10th place, the highest of anybody on this list. And had he been on any season from Big Brother 15 to Big Brother 24, he would have made the jury. On top of that, he was going to make the jury anyways until the very last minute, where Chemo's eviction speech flipped 2 votes and resulted in Joseph going home in a 4-3 vote. But that meant that it took the first ever vote flip at a live eviction to take Joseph out before the jury. So he was primed to make it there, even if his winning chances weren't necessarily the greatest. Although the show kinda clowned on Joseph for thinking his game was way better than it actually was, I don't think it was a bad game at all. In comparison to the game he thought he was playing, yeah, maybe. But he was genuinely doing pretty well. Early on in the season, he was cultivating relationships with players on the bottom just to keep in his back pocket, which we saw pay dividends once one of those players, Tucker, ended up becoming a huge power player in the game, and it helped him be brought into the 6th Avenue Alliance. But even way before that, Joseph was a key piece in putting together the Collective Alliance, and even though he was on the outskirts of that alliance, it was still a majority alliance that he was a part of from the beginning of the game. Joseph very clearly understood the strategy of the game better than most of the players in the house. And while I do think he falters a bit when it comes to the social game, he still had all sorts of deals and relationships lined up. He had a final 2 with Tucker, a final 2 with Quinn, a very close alliance with Leah, and early on in the game, he had a good connection with Chelsea. Joseph also showcased an ability to be adaptive on the fly, which is not something that a lot of Big Brother players have. During the Week 4 eviction, Joseph had the wherewithal to pick up on the fact that the vote was flipping onto Cedric, and he correctly switched his vote over on a whim in order to blend in and pretend like he was with the majority the whole time, which I personally find extremely impressive. Also, All of this isn't even to mention that Joseph shouldn't have even been on the block during his eviction week. He was the 4th nominee that week and was only put on the block due to some pretty crazy circumstances. And that was his first time being nominated all season long. If there was no AI Arena, Joseph wouldn't have been on the block that week. If this season was 2 years earlier, he would have made it to jury. It just felt like so many things had to go wrong in order for Joseph to not make it to the jury. Did he make mistakes? Of course. I could give you a list of things that Joseph could have done better in the house, and I do think his hubris got in the way of his own winning chances and played a factor in Chelsea and Mackenzie flipping their votes at the last second in order to send him home. But in the scope of looking at all the other pre-jurors in the history of Big Brother, I feel like Joseph was much more active and intuitive and just did a lot more right without needing competitions to fall his way. So feel free to disagree, but I truly do believe that Joseph is the best pre-juror in Big Brother history.
Back in week 1, I created this alliance, The Collective, but she thought it was fake and decided to blow it up. But ever since then, I've been able to pick up the pieces and reform this alliance.
I really think like you and I would be a big yin to the yang.
There's definitely value in my final 2 with Tucker. The dude is the freaking Terminator in these competitions. If I do happen to win somehow, I would have to make a decision between my majority alliance and my final 2 with Tucker that I really don't want to make at this point. I saw Leah holding Chemo's hand like super hard. I don't think she's gonna do all this if she's not gonna vote his way. So I voted Cedric out. I didn't want to be on the outs.
I would love to get to the end and win nothing and win the game.
That would be...
I think that would be epic.
That would be crazy.
I'm a badass.
And there we go. Now, you may have noticed that all of these players came from Big Brother 17 and beyond, and that's simply because of the fact that the pre-jury lasts a bit longer nowadays than it used to. Plus, with the evolution of the game and basic strategy being more commonly known, it does make sense for most of the better pre-jurors to come from more recent seasons. I just wanted to clarify that so you know that I'm not purposefully leaving out the old school representatives. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I, of course, need to give that extra special shout out to all of my YouTube members and patrons who would unfortunately never be able to make it onto this list because they're all winning the show if they make it on. And, as always, here's a clip for you on your way out.
I can't believe Becky did so good in the competition. I can't believe you didn't do good. That's so
whatever,
annoying.
dude. It's really stop. Like you can't put that much pressure on me. Like I'm not good with puzzles.
Can you, Steve? I picked damn Steve.
What we need to talk to you about is not using the power of veto.
Things would go more smoothly. But again, if you're not comfortable, Johnny, like just say no.
No! I'm not staying on the block for you.